I know two that don't. Well, they need to get free feeder and for the feeder. Has that been yet?
Nope. We were talking about
Somebody give us a lot of time for a little while. So I didn't say that you got
you've got this process.
pretty good entry.
I guess. That's it.
Pretty much, yeah. Buy a cow.
Because
Yeah.
we should just buy one or two feed them out. We've all stopped. Same as what we got, and we keep to. So, two of them, those are dogs. Because we have a
Nobody wants front row. It looks funny. Yeah, they do. I'm sure. You're brave.
We're not scared.
I would say if you, there, I guess there was some people who like paid for the reserve seating, and if you did, sit in the reserve seating.
we're in the spit.
Sorry.
You paid to
Yeah,
sit.
we'll be your friends for the day. We'll be your buddies.
Anybody like to buy it?
Yeah. $5.
Oh yeah, this is supposedly there
Yeah.
was, well, 23 people who paid for this. Oh, okay.
I did with her. She did, we did.
Oh, I am not sorry if I used your
Because my husband, he would freak out if he broke his foot or something. No, I
My stuff.
Yes, you would.
Oh, she did.
Yeah, exactly, there it is. There it is.
We're gonna need your information.
Right.
I'm good, I don't want to.
Well, it's 9:15, so we'll probably get started. We only have 45 minutes, so, and beekeeping classes, a lot of times are like 2-day events, so, I'm only gonna be able to cover so much. I'm trying to hit some, I tried to put together something that's gonna hit a little bit of something for everyone. People who are interested in bees or, may already have some bees, but, I'm just kind of curious, how many people actually here have bees already? Okay, so there's a few of you, and then how many of you really want bees? So that's why you're here, you're really interested in, okay. So I'm probably gonna be a little more focused on people who want bees, a little less on the people who already have bees, just because the time constraints. But then the other question I had was how many people here don't want bees and you hate anything that stings and flies around your head? Is there some people here that like that? You know, like, I know my wife is in that camp. She does not like stinging, flying insects. So I'm the bee person in the family. She kind of stays away from it. Just a little background on myself. We started homesteading about 10 years ago when we moved out to the Johnson County area we originally lived in Raytown. And so, of course, we started with the usual chickens and gardening. You know, chickens are the gateway drug to homesteading. So then you go down the hole there. So then we ended up getting ducks. We had about 30, 40 ducks that we did for egg laying and sold duck eggs. And then we did meat chickens. We still do meat chickens, normally like an annual kind of thing. And then we moved to a little bit larger property that we live on now. That previous one was like 3 acres. Now we're close to 30 acres. We have a dairy cow and her calf, and then we raise, we hand milk her, and then we have a flock of dairy goats that we raise. We've done hogs in the past. We've done meat rabbits. We've done. We still have our egg-laying flock of chickens, and then obviously we have bees. So currently, I run about 20 hives annually. As you get bigger into beekeeping, you'll learn that your count of hive colonies kind of ebbs and flows. You have more at one point, and then it'll shrink down, and you kind of go back and forth. In the spring, I produce nukes. So then, I might have 20 parent colonies, but then you could have an additional 30 nukes to take care of on top of your other colonies. So depending on where you're at in your beekeeping journey, you know, your number of colonies, your management's going to change. So that's just kind of a little bit about myself and kind of where I'm at. When I got started beekeeping, I kind of got started through a friend. He had probably about 8 hives, and he was looking to kind of downsize a little bit. He just didn't have a lot of time to try and keep up with everything. And so anyways, I did a split off of some of his colonies. Ended up buying him some queens. We kind of just made like a little deal. So I took care of him with queens, and then he got me some bees and some frames. As far as nukes go, like this is a nuke box right here. So it's like basically 5 deep frames, and this is a deep frame right here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we kind of get going. So the bee colony, kind of made up bee colony. You've got your queens, you've got your workers, and then you have your drones, which your drones are your male bees. There's typically only 1 queen per hive, but that's not always the case. Sometimes there's 2 queens in a hive. Depending on the queen's age and condition, they can sometimes do what's called a supersedure queen. They'll create a new queen because they know that queen is failing, or they know there's a problem. So they're going to create a new queen to replace her. Sometimes they'll do that before they swarm. They'll create queens, but in some cases they're just trying to replace that old queen that they know is something's wrong with. So I actually had one happen where the queen, they created a supersedure cell. I monitored it. That queen cell hatched. I left them alone. She actually went out and got mated, came back. My old queen was marked so I could see her. So like you can kind of see on this one, like there's a little green mark on that picture. So some queens get marked. It depends if you want to mark queens or not, or if you buy them marked. They do, sometimes the marks will wear off. But anyways, that ended up being, there was the mother queen and then the daughter queen in that colony. They both lived in the colony through the whole winter, came out in the spring. I found both of them inside the colony. The colony was like booming with bees. I ended up splitting the mother queen out of that colony because I wanted to use her to make some new queens with. But anyways, just an interesting little fact. There's not always just 1 queen in your hive.
What's the lifespan of a queen? I mean, how long they live?
Yeah, so the lifespan of a queen, they can live up to like 5 years. You know, as far as like in your operation, like a 3-year-old queen's an old queen. It's kind of like chickens, you know, they start getting a little bit older, they're not going to lay as many eggs. That's going to bring all the production, that's going to bring everything down. So, you know, having fresh queens is going to help you out a lot, especially if you're going to try and produce some honey. Like this picture, so there's like, it's kind of hard to see, but like this is like a darker colored queen, and this queen's like a lot lighter colored. And then like here, I know it's kind of a small picture up here, but these are called these are queen cells right here. These little ones there. Here's a little queen cell right here. And then these horizontal cells that are a little bit larger, those are drone cells. So inside the colony, sometimes you start getting confused because like they'll hang queen cells right next to these big drone cells. But you always know queen cells are the only cells that go vertical in a hive. So they can actually do, sometimes a queen cell will actually be on the side of your comb, like on the comb right here. Sometimes it's down on the bottom. Most of the time you'll see it down on the bottom, but sometimes I'll put them up on the side of the frame. So it just kind of depends. Yeah,
But if they're up, that's usually your supersedure.
Yeah.
Replace, but if they're down on the bottom,
yeah,
that's
probably
your
swarm.
swarm cells, and you have not been controlling your bees or managing them.
Yep, definitely. So there's a lot of nuances, so I'm not gonna be able to cover everything. That's where Larry's great now. There's and I'll get to that. I'll get to that more. There's as far as beekeeping, you know, you're gonna want to continue to educate yourself. Just a couple other bee facts. The average number of bees in a healthy hive can be anywhere from 40,000 to 60,000 bees. And then like kind of averages like 3,500 to 4,000 bees per pound of bees. So if you were to weigh the bees, there'd be about that many. in a pound of bees. And then a rough estimate of like bees per frame. So like if you have like one side of a frame, because they're going to have comb on both sides of this. This is called foundation. And I didn't have any drawn comb. I didn't bring any. But there can be anywhere from there can be around 3,500 worker cells, some bee cell, like baby bees on one side when they lay the eggs. And so that means you basically got a pound of bees per side of frame. So you could have like 7, 8 frames with brood on them. So that's, you're getting up into 8, 9, 10 pounds of bees. So roughly 50 to 80,000 bees can produce 10 pounds of honey per day. So that's also dependent on your location and how much nectar flow is going on and stuff like that. So that's where your healthy colony, having a large healthy colony, is what's going to produce honey. You've got to have that healthy colony to then produce the honey. So then there's like different roles. Actually, I was going to take a quick look at here's like a worker bee. You can see kind of the size. Obviously, these aren't to scale, so your bees aren't this big. But the queen, these are kind of scaled in comparison to them, though. So your nurse bees are going to be quite a bit smaller than the queen bee. And then you've got your drones. So like when you start getting a lot of drones in a hive and they're all crawling around, and then you've got the queen crawling around, it makes it a little bit harder to find a queen. But there's really, it's something when I was a new beekeeper, was one of the things I used to always want to try and find the queen. It's like something that you just naturally like, oh, I gotta find this queen, make sure she's doing okay. But really, as you start beekeeping more, you're not really looking for the queen. Actually, I find the queen most when I'm not looking for her. You want to look at what she's doing. You want to look at, what's her eggs look like? Does she have new eggs? Is there good larvae? What's the larva look like? How many frames do you have of capped brood? So that way you can kind of see, like, this queen's been doing what she needs to be doing. Here's all the different stages of eggs, larvae, and capped brood. That's going to basically be the production of my hive as I move on. As far as the worker bees, they kind of their roles kind of change in the hive as they develop. So when they're young, they're considered nurse bees. They're a lot smaller. They actually, as the worker bee matures, they get larger. When they first hatch, they're tiny little things. They're all fuzzy looking. They're kind of cute little bees. And they're actually the most gentle when they're little. When they're nurse bees, they're not looking to sting you. Well, you can let nurse bees crawl around on you, and they don't have that defensive trait to them yet. They haven't really developed at that point. But then you've got your foraging bees. Your foraging bees, they go collect the nectar, they go get pollen, they collect water. So they're going out doing all the work, and that's during the height of a bee's life. They're going to be doing all the work, and that's why they don't live as long. Now your worker bees that overwinter, they're a little bit different. They live a lot longer than a spring summer worker bee, because those bees have to survive in that cluster to keep the queen warm, keep whatever they've got going on. If they've got a little bit of brood, they've got to keep everything warm through the winter and survive a lot longer. So they're a little bit different. But I'm not going to dig into that a whole lot. That's a lot of stuff that you can learn, if you go on to doing some other bee classes and or bee club type of stuff. The drones, that's kind of the last thing. Those are your male bees. The drones, they don't really do a whole lot in the colony. They just kind of hang out, they eat, they just have a good time. Once they get matured, then they go fly out to drone congregation areas. So then they just go hang out there, and then they wait for a queen to fly by. When the queen comes in, then as many drones as possible will mate that queen before then she makes her flight back to the colony to then start laying eggs. But a hive, each hive is going to produce drones. They will produce drones. You're going to have drone in your drone comb in your colony. So So, I mean, it's a healthy colony if they're going to be, they've got to be producing drones. I personally use drone comb. There's a special comb, it's green. The drone cells, there's not really a picture of it, but so the cell size is larger for a drone than it is for a worker. And so the drone comb, so like this foundation, so this is worker foundation. The combs, these comb sizes are made for a worker bee. But a drone comb is actually a larger size cell. I like to use that because they don't put drone comb all over my colony quite as much. Because they will put drone comb in the colony no matter what. So they'll put it, let's go back to this picture here. So like if you see right here, it's on the bottom of the frame. They really like putting drone comb on the bottom of the frame. It's fine, it's not a big deal, but when you start getting a ton of drone comb all over that, you get a bunch of drone comb on the side of your frame, then you have less space for worker bees to be hatched. Plus, like when you start selling nukes and doing things like that, I don't like to sell frames that have just tons of drone comb on it. I want worker bee comb. Let's move back. So another little quick, I'm not going to get into this too deep, but it's kind of hard to see because it's just so small up here, but you've got your queen, your worker, and your drones. Your queens, they're 16 days from egg to emergence from their cell. A worker is 21 days, and a drone is 24 days. The drone's the longest period to hatch. Queen's actually the shortest, which you think the queen would be at least as long as a worker, but they're not. So that's kind of a little breakdown. Those numbers, I like to actually kind of keep a chart on hand, or at least I keep it in my phone, because sometimes like the timing, knowing how long it takes from a queen to be like a queen cell. Say they lay an egg in a queen cell, and you see the egg and then the feed inside of a queen cell. Well, now they're going to cap that cell in 7.5, 8 days. So as soon as that queen cell's capped, then you've got another 8 days before she hatches. So there's different management things, different things you're going to want to do based on that time frame. Same thing with your worker bees. If you want a strong colony, if you want that colony to peak out, you want that colony to be as large as possible going into spring when all of your flowers and everything are blooming. It takes 21 days to get those bees to hatch. So what she's laying today, it's 21 days later. Those are nurse bees. They're still not foraging yet. So there's just a time delay for everything that you do. So also I was going to mention that the bees rely on pheromones and physical movements to communicate. So obviously I can't demonstrate that, and I don't have a video, but they do little dances to kind of tell, so if they want to tell them there's nectar, there's something over here, they go in the colony, they do a dance, and they tell the other bees where something is, and they can basically give them exact coordinates of where to go. So like when I have honey sitting in my garage and my kids leave the garage door open, they give the exact coordinates to where to go to my garage and fill it with bees. So I mean, they figure it out real quick. So lesson learned: don't leave honey in your garage and have your kids leave your garage door open. Sorry, got a little bit of junk in my throat. So I was going to ask the next question, going to cover a few little questions. So why do you want to keep bees? Anybody out here, you want to say why are you thinking about getting bees? Why do you want bees? Anybody want to speak up?
Honey.
You want honey? Okay. What else? Okay, pollination. You think pollination for your garden? Or okay. Okay, so yeah.
And bees are awesome.
Yeah, bees are awesome.
They're fantastic.
They're neat things. So like some people want to keep bees because they want to save the bees, because they hear about bees, the colonies collapsing or the loss of bees. That's a great thing to want to do. I encourage people to have bees, obviously, but it's actually pretty difficult. There's a lot of things that we're up against. So. You may probably actually kill more bees than you save starting out. It's just kind of the way it is. There's kind of a learning curve to it. Then you also, like pollination, the bees they're gonna hit all those trees, they're gonna hit the garden, they're gonna do stuff like that. But there's also, if that's the only thing you're wanting the bees for, there's carpenter bees, there's ants, there's all these other things that are gonna pollinate your plants too. So, having a couple colonies in your yard is probably not gonna have that much of an impact on your pollination. But like I said, if you want the honey, then there's always that cross benefit of having different things on your property, like bees. The other thing is if you like that local raw honey, if you obviously there's a pretty big cost to getting into bees. You've got to buy the bees, you've got to buy all the equipment, you've got to get everything started. So I always recommend help out those your other local homestead people, your people that are raising the bees. Buy their honey, buy it from somebody somebody you can talk to, where their honey comes from, support those other homesteaders. I mean, there's probably going to be a theme all day today is if we're trying as a community to grow, you're trying to grow your homestead, help somebody else grow theirs, there's going to be that reciprocal, there's always stuff you'll be able to help the other person out with, with us, we have goats, we have actually somebody that's a vendor here today, we have one of their goats at our house getting bred by our buck. So, if, there's always those things, but then they help us out on other stuff. So it's like, there's always that kind of, helping each other out. Then it's like with bees, there's always new things to learn. They're a super fascinating creature. You can go to as many bee classes as you want, you're probably still not learning everything. And then obviously, how much are you going to retain? It's kind of hard to, you kind of have to hear things a few times before you really take it in. But it's pretty neat. Bees, you can kind of go a lot of different routes with it. Obviously if you have healthy colonies, you're gonna collect honey. But if you want to start trying other things, some people raise queens, some people sell nukes. You can start doing stuff with the honey. You can do flavored honeys, you can do creamed honeys. Then you have, you start harvesting honey, then you can start eating wax. You can harvest that wax, you can melt the wax down and start making other stuff with the wax. So there's a lot of little products, a lot of little niches that you can kind of go into with bees. So it just kind of depends on what time you have and where you want to go with things. But that's kind of one of the neat stuff about it. You've got a lot of different options. The next thing is, do you know a beekeeper? This is actually a picture of me. See that really clean bee suit? Yeah, I didn't know anything at that point. That bee suit's way too clean. But that was actually when I was with that friend getting the bees for the first time. So these were actually my first 2 colonies right here. So one thing I like to, I wanted to encourage people to do is, get to know some beekeepers for one, but go experience beekeeping firsthand. Get a suit on, go out in the yard. You don't have to actually go pulling the bees out and messing with the frames. If the beekeeper you're with is fine with it, they'll give you a frame you can hold on to, look at them. But there's a lot of nervousness when the first time you get into a hive. I mean, you got a hive full of 40,000 bees that are you open that lid up and they start shooting out, and you smoke them down and stuff. That's all stuff you learn, but it's just very intimidating at that point. I mean, they can sting you. You're like, is this suit gonna really protect me? I don't know. So that's something that you go in and experiencing it. If a beekeeper takes you out to their yard, if I have somebody at my house, I'm not going to go open up one of my hot hives. You start learning personality traits of hives. I've got a couple hives that when you open them up, they're not going to be nice to you. But then you got the ones that are more gentle. I can get into. I could go without a suit. I mean, I've done bees, sleeveless shirts and stuff. I like to wear a veil personally. I don't like getting stung in my face. It's just me. So I don't do the whole walking around with nothing on. I want at least a veil. because I don't like being stung in my face. And then they get in my hair, and then they try and sting, they get in my beard. I don't enjoy that. So there's a couple options, you know, as far as meeting beekeepers. But let me move back just a little bit. If you do go to a beekeeper's house and you're watching and observing, just be respectful of that beekeeper. Each beekeeper is going to do stuff a little bit differently. I mean, I guarantee I do stuff different than another beekeeper. And then that also depends on, you know, how they keep their bees. And we'll kind of move on to that in just a minute, but there's different methods and styles of keeping bees. So that's going to change kind of how, you know, how that beekeeper is going to explain things or do things. They may handle the frames differently. You know, if I've got a foundation, I've got frames with foundation, I can flip and turn, I can mess with this frame a lot more. If I don't have foundation, you know, you start flipping and turning this frame around, you know, that there's less support to that comb. Or if you have completely foundationless, like top bar type beekeeping, there's nothing there. So you have to keep that vertical, and you kind of got to do this number to try and check it out. So you gotta be mindful. Everybody's gonna do stuff differently, so it depends on how you decide to keep your bees. Another thing I encourage big time is your local bee clubs. I personally haven't had a lot of time to participate in the local bee club, but we do have one here just down where they meet just down the road. It's called Church of Hope in Centerview. But the bee club is Johnson County Bee Club. They're on Facebook. Larry, he does a lot with that bee club. But you know, join that bee club. Go to the meetings. They have monthly meetings. It's the third Thursday of the month, right?
Yes, at 6:30, we just had a meeting.
Yep.
This one will be Roger Wood. That's a good one for you to come.
Yeah. So, you know, hit some of those meetings up. There's also the Missouri Beekeepers Association. There's also like Facebook pages and stuff like that. The Missouri Beekeepers Facebook page. You just got to be careful on the Facebook on Facebook stuff, because you know, there's just, like I said, every beekeeper does something different. They all have their own opinions. They all, you know, do something different. So, you know, if somebody puts something out on Facebook, I'm having this problem, you're going to have 10 different answers. Yeah.
June 22nd, the state association's actually having their bee day right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be like 6 different tracks with beginners, a lot of beginner stuff.
Nice. So yeah, so there's a lot of options. There's more and more. There's actually another class going on today that I would have probably been at.
Camp Valor outdoors.
Yeah, it's going to be called Camp Valor. It's down in Holden, or just outside of Holden. So there's a lot of options around here. Get on Facebook. You know, I think Facebook's the best place to find the beekeepers, find when the meetings, the events are going on. The next thing is like, went the wrong direction. Have you taken any classes? So, like I said, the bee meetings are great, but you can also take like different bee classes. They just did a beginner beekeeper class with the Johnson County Bee Club. I think Rolla is doing something either today or tomorrow. But there's lots of different bee classes. There's also online bee classes. You know, I don't really have any that I can say, take this particular bee class, but I'm sure there's probably some out there that are pretty good. But then, like I said, try and find those hands-on, experience. Like get out there, like actually do some stuff where you can.
Talking on that, Camp Valor is a for veterans organization, but anybody can volunteer out there to help on high. So sign up on Camp Valor on Facebook. They have all the dates, and you can volunteer, come out and help.
Yep. And there's one of the guys that does that a lot. His name is Steve House. He's always posting up on Facebook like, "Hey, I'm going to go work the bees on this day. You can come out and watch or come help or whatever." So.
And you want to help Steve House? He's down. He's had surgery on his arm.
Yeah,
so he's helping.
Yeah, and he said he's going to do something on Monday even. So there's a lot of opportunity if you want to get in there, or somebody can contact me. I have people out to the house. They come and watch as I go through the beehives and stuff. I talk about what I'm doing, what I'm looking at. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunities, you know, just try and take those opportunities. It's going to help you. It's going to make you more successful. I mean, there's a lot of challenges with beekeeping, and that's kind of what I'm going to go into next. This is up here. It's a lot smaller than it looked on my computer. But one of the big things that we're up against is the Varroa mite. I'm sure if you've been in, like, kind of looking at beekeeping stuff at all, you've seen stuff about mites. The Varroa mite is a parasitic mite that feeds on the honeybees. They reproduce within the cells of the bees. They actually prefer drone cells over some of the other cells. And then the female buries into the brood food. They lay like an unfertilized egg, which produces like a male mite. Then they start laying fertilized eggs about once a day to produce female mites. And then they can actually, the nymphs along with the mother, like feed on the developing pupa inside the cell. So like, it's not just the mites that are like riding around on the bees that are kind of a problem. It's, you know, like the reproduction of the mites themselves causes damage to the bees. So that introduces a whole host of other issues. So monitoring and taking care, like dealing with the mites is a huge thing. There's a lot of different opinions, a lot of different ways of doing it. So I'm not going to get deep into that, but you need to know you need to look into the mites. You need to be checking there's different ways to do mite checks. So just be aware. That's kind of like, that's why I put it at the top of the list. Mites are probably I'd say one of the number one issues with beekeeping, or challenges with beekeeping right now. You also have like pesticides and herbicides that can be issues. Obviously, like urban lawns can sometimes be a pretty big issue. Like obviously, if you spray all the clover, you spray all the dandelions, you don't like there can be a lack of forage in some of those areas just because, you know, grass doesn't really give you a bee anything to work with. Small hive beetles and wax moths. Small hive beetles are like a little black beetle that'll be crawling around in your hive. They lay eggs, which then hatch into larvae, and the larva goes around and makes a mess in a hive. They're not typically an issue in a strong colony. So if you have strong, healthy hives, they'll chase around the mites. Like the mites will be an agitating factor inside the hives. Obviously, you don't want too many small hive beetles. That can somewhat be mitigated, like I said, between a healthy colony and then hive location. Hive location, you want to have your bees in a sunny area. You want where there's plenty of air, plenty of sun. If you have them like a low-lying area where there's a lot of moisture and stuff like that, you're going to have a harder problem with small hive beetles and potentially other stuff. Wax moths, I've never really had an issue with wax moths inside my hive. The bees take care of those. I have a bigger issue with that when I have equipment with comb in it. The wax moths get into your equipment that you have in the garage or something, and they make a mess of it. And there's ways to mitigate that. Weather, heat and dryness, that eliminates the nectar flow. Rainy weather, that limits their ability to go forage. They can't go get nectar if it's raining a whole bunch. Heavy rains can wash nectar out of the flowers, so you may think, oh, I got a lot of rain, there's going to be a lot of nectar. It actually takes time for that nectar to come back up out of those flowers and be usable for the bees. Cold and moist conditions can cause condensation issues, things like that. And then freezing temps can sometimes kill your bees or keep the cluster from being able to move to the food within the colony. So there's also different like brood diseases that can be a factor with bees. So I'm going to kind of get on to what hive system do you plan to use and why. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sorry. Yeah.
What about when it's really, we keep ours in the sun, but when it's really, really hot outside, do you do anything special for that, or?
Not really. They're gonna beard. They're gonna come out. They're gonna
Cause
try
they're all
and fan.
outside of the, you
Mhm.
know, I don't know if they're working to cool it down. or-
They when there's too many bees, if it gets too warm, bees will come outside. They'll stay cool outside. They'll just
Okay.
hang out. If it starts to cool off in the evening, they'll start crawling back into the hive. They regulate. You can sometimes, you know, if the hive, the lid can be propped up a little bit, and that can allow a little more airflow. You can take reducers off. That can help a little bit airflow, but it really depends. I mean, they're gonna take care of. They're not gonna get too hot and die.
Okay.
Put it that way. They're gonna regulate their temperature if they need to. So there's different hive types, and I'm running out of time real fast, but this is the Langstroth hive. This is the most common hive. This is the way I keep my bees. There's deep boxes. This just has a single deep. This is a queen excluder. It's basically a wire cage that the queen cannot pass through. And then anything above the queen excluder is considered a honey super. These are like a picture of like a medium box. It's a smaller box than what these frames are. But I use mediums for my honey just because they're not as heavy. They worked in my original extractor. And I also like to do like 2 deep boxes up below my excluder. And that kind of depends on what's going on throughout the year. There's a lot of other like nuances and stuff. But that keeps the queen from coming through that cage and up into the honey and laying brood up into those boxes where you want the honey to be. It also keeps the queen from being up there, so when you want to pull your honey off, you don't have to worry about the queen being up in those boxes. She's going to be down in the bottom boxes, you know, with all the, you know, laying brood and eggs and everything. So this is the most common. This is the way I keep bees. This is the way I recommend if you're going to start out keeping bees is with the Langstroth, because it's the most common. You're going to be able to find equipment the easiest. You're going to, when you buy nukes, you're going to get nukes with deep frames most likely. So all your equipment's going to be the most common and most readily available. If you decide down the road that you're like, I'm done with this, it's a lot easier to sell them too. So if you decide to get out of the bees, you can sell. Now, there's a lot of people who do like the horizontal hives. You know, like you're not lifting a whole box of frames off of another box. You know, you're working through frames, you know, horizontally. You can have like multiple openings. There's a lot of different variations and ways that people do horizontal hives. Like I said, I don't do horizontal hives. It's to each their own. I like to kind of keep everything kind of like streamlined. I have my deep boxes for brood and stuff, and then I have my mediums for the honey supers. Then you've got another type of horizontal hive. You have like a top bar. They basically just they have these little wooden bars. They build the comb down off of the bar. There's no foundation, no nothing. It's just natural comb that comes down. These are nice and pretty. But sometimes they can get all cross-combed and wonky and you name it. So there's, like I said, not an expert at this. But there's people who do it, and sometimes and that's like the other thing I said, like you might start out doing it one way, but then you like, hey, I want to try a top bar. Okay, well then go get a top bar, and then you have bees. You can kind of play around a little bit more as you go. Then there's like lay-ins hives. They've become a little more popular. It's like an extra deep version of a deep frame, so it's going to be even longer. And there's special ones for that. So then you kind of have like, I was going to bring up between standard practices versus natural beekeeping. So like standard practices, you know, you're gonna be testing for mites, and you're probably going to be treating for mites. You're going to use oxalic acid. There's a lot of other different options as far as treating bees for mites. Larry actually has a really nice oxalic acid tool out there that he sells. So there's ways to treat the bees. Some people want to go treatment free. They want to try and keep the bees as naturally as possible. You know, I'm totally fine with that, but you got to be kind of factor in. You still got to be a beekeeper, not just like people joke, you don't want to be a bee, you want to be a beekeeper, not a bee haver. So don't just have the bees and leave them. You need to actually take care of them. So you need to be keeping track of them. If you're not going to be doing treatments, you need to be keeping track of how many mites they have. You need to be doing a bunch of other things to try and help them with the mites. And then that can come back to like genetics and things like that as well. There's a lot of progress being made, like Varroa sensitive hygiene, it's like called VSH. There's a lot of different things that are going to kind of help. You know, I think they're moving forward to where like maybe we can eliminate some of the treatment stuff for mites, maybe moving in that direction. But me personally, I try and treat as little as possible, but I still want to knock down the mites. If I'm selling a nuke to somebody, I don't want to sell a nuke to a new customer that's loaded with mites. I don't want like, here's a mite bomb for you. So I treat for mites because I want to make sure that the levels are at as low a level as possible so that you have the most chance of success as possible. So the next thing, got a few minutes left. So I just threw a couple helpful tips that I like to know is take notes during each hive inspection. Obviously, if you have like 100 hives, you're not going to take notes on each hive. But if you have a few hives, take notes on each one. Have like a little notebook that you take out there with you. Write down what you saw, what kind of you like, oh, I see something kind of weird here. Write it down, like go research that. You know, like what do I need to look at? Work with the bees and not against them. So the bees have their natural behaviors, natural tendencies. Try and work with those natural behaviors. Try not to like force the bees to do something that they're not naturally going to do. Young queens are less prone to swarm. So like when I sell a nuke, those nukes have a fresh queen. That's a new queen from this year. That queen's going to be less prone to be swarming because there's such a young, fresh queen. They have more. They're putting off a new, fresh pheromone. Those nurse bees aren't like the nurse bees and worker bees aren't saying like, this girl needs replaced or you need to go. Now, if you don't take care of your hive spacing, like this 80% rule, if the hive spacing is wrong, they could still swarm. So they'd be like, we're out of space, we're growing, we gotta move. So there's the 80% rule for adding space. Like as the box is about 80% full, you add another box. That can kind of give or take. It depends if you're working with like fresh foundation where there's no comb like this. Then they need time to start building comb. They need, you know, like, so there's different management practices to try and help them build comb, help them expand. So sometimes you have to give them a little bit sooner so that they have time to have the comb and build into their additional space. Other thing is buy a good ventilated bee suit. Don't skimp on the bee suit. It gets super hot in the summer. You're gonna sweat. Like if you're gonna be a beekeeper and you're gonna take care of bees, like I said, you have your hives in full sun, you're gonna be drenched. I mean, like my bee suit, you don't wanna come smell my bee suit. You're gonna get dirty, you're gonna get very, very sweaty. It could be a good weight loss procedure though. If you wanna lose a little weight, or you wanna sweat some pounds off, that's definitely an option. So ways to acquire bees. I'm almost out of time. You got nucleus colonies, or people call them nukes. So this is a nuke box right here. It comes with five deep frames inside of it, and it's going to be loaded up with bees. So you're going to have a fresh queen that's already crawling around in there, laying eggs. You're going to have eggs, larvae, capped brood inside of that nuke box. You're going to already have some forager bees. You're going to have, it's basically a working colony just in a small package. But the nice thing about a nuke is they're going to rapidly expand. Because you have all these stages of bees, then they're going to expand. You're probably going to have at least 4 sides of capped brood of frames. So at least 2 frames that are completely covered with brood when you get your nuke. All those bees, that's roughly 4 pounds of bees right there when they all hatch out. And that queen, as soon as a bee hatches, that queen's going to go right back in and be producing more eggs. And then especially once you get them in a big box, she's going to keep laying more eggs, and they're going to keep expanding. So that's why I sell nukes. That's why I recommend nukes. Now you do have the option of packages. Packages are a little bit cheaper. You have a queen that comes in like a little queen cage. and then a box, like a wire mesh box full of bees. And I didn't put a picture on here. But if you're a new beekeeper and you get a package of bees and then you just have a bunch of fresh comb, like no comb, you just have fresh foundation, and you stick them in there, your chances of success are definitely a little bit less. They will possibly go in there and build comb and start and do fine. But then you've got to go back to that chart I showed you, the timeline. 21 days for a worker bee to hatch. So that queen hadn't even laid any eggs yet. They don't have comb yet. So they've got to go in there and they've got to build the comb. Then they've got to start, the queen's got to start laying eggs. And then you've got that timetable before those worker bees start hatching, and then you get your colony. So those bees that you got in your package, you've got to basically do all that work, collecting, building the comb, doing all of that, then try and forage, and then trying to make honey and do all of that. So if you already have bees, if you already have comb, if you have stuff like that, then a package can work okay, because then you're throwing them right into a box full of comb. They can go right to work. You can boost them up with one of your other colonies. You can throw a frame of brood from one of your other colonies in there. You can do a lot of different stuff once you have bees or you already have another colony. So that's where packages can kind of work out. Swarms and cutouts. We've got the Swarm Master over here, but you can catch swarms. I don't do a lot with swarms. I've had too many chances where somebody tells me, "Oh, I got a swarm at my house," and then I get there and they're gone. It's like, I don't got time for that. If I want more bees, I can split. I can make as many colonies that I want out of the bees I have. So I've done it. I've gone and helped people out. It's like, I got a swarm of bees in my yard or whatever. I want them out. I'll go help them out. But I don't actively go swarm catching. Now, folks, like there's a guy named Paul over here. He went nutso on swarm trapping this year. How many swarms did you catch?
22 last year.
22. So he got 22 colonies basically off of swarms. Some of them may not have survived, but probably most of them.
Right.
But one thing to remember is the swarm, you might be getting the bees for free, but it's still not free. You got to have all the equipment. You got to have a place to put them. You got to have a home for those bees. So then you got to be buying some equipment to put them in. Cutouts. That's where like the bees have actually made a colony in something, in somebody's wall, in their house, something like that. I don't really recommend that for most people, especially if you're new. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Plus, I personally would want insurance or whatever to, like, you're cutting someone's house or something open, like, there's a little bit of risk to that. We're basically right out of time. But my name's Dustin Cooper again. I've got it up there. You can find us on Facebook. We've got our homestead page. It's called Living Water Homestead. That's where I post stuff we post stuff about our goats, but I also post like my nukes or bees or honey for sale, stuff like that. So Living Water Homestead, like our page, follow us. And then I've got my phone number here. This is actually a Google Voice number, but you can reach me on that number. It does kind of go on state your name when you call or whatever. So don't be worried if it tells you to do that. But you can reach me on that phone number. You can text me on that number too. But yeah, you can message me on Facebook as well. I respond to messaging. I think we're out of time, but do we have any brief questions? Anybody want
I got a very quick one I think I know the answer. Flow hives.
Yep, that's what I wanted to
Pass
know.
or
I don't recommend flow hives. Yeah, you can get honey out of them or whatever. You don't have to have an extractor, but I don't. It's not the money you put into it. You're not gonna. I've actually helped a person work their flow hive before, and I was not impressed.
The only thing I see wrong with them is the new beekeepers get them, and they stick the bees in,
Yeah,
and
maybe
they
it's
think
good.
they should drum the bees.
Yep.
But they don't think about the winter concept, we gotta leave so much resources, but they need to work, line first or something else, so they can understand the practices.
Yeah, that's exactly why I mentioned get a length straw hive.
Yeah.
Start with what's most common, and then go from there. If you're successful with that, you can keep them alive. you can try whatever you want. You can play around. I mean, that's part of the fun with beekeeping, is you can start doing all sorts of stuff. You can manipulate, you can force them to make queens for you. Yep.
How often do you check your bees?
Depends on the time of year. In the winter, I don't check them, but and that's
In the spring, summer,
yeah.
fall.
So that's one of the nice things about bees, like cow, goats, everything else. You got to take care of every day. Like you have to go give them stuff every day. With bees, I like to do every in the early spring, probably every couple weeks. I get into them and see how things are doing, arrange, possibly feed them if they need fed. Don't be afraid to feed your bees sugar water, and there's ratios and stuff. But then like when you get into like May, like early May or June, I like to get in there like once a week because that's when you get into your time frame when they're looking to swarm. Because like I said, 7 to 8 days to cap a queen cell. So if you get in there in day 9, I've had it where I had a hive where it was busting, massive hive, and I had it at another location, and I was like, I need to get into this hive, they're probably going to swarm. And I got there on day 9 and they had already swarmed. Because as soon as they capped the queen cells, they swarmed. So the old queen flew off with like, I think that hive probably lost like 8 pounds of bees. I mean, it was like probably one of the biggest swarms you ever seen.
Got it.
Yeah, a question here.
Yeah.
So you were talking about drone cells, if you don't want to mimic that, like how do you take care of those?
Well, I don't cut drone cells out. I just don't like drone cells everywhere inside of my worker comb. So I personally use drone comb. It's like a green frame. Larry, you have some? I have some at home, but
I've got some home, but I don't use them,
Yeah.
because most people are using them to help on the micro drone.
yeah. So you can use the drone comb. You can use for mite control. Like I said, mites prefer drone comb. So people will use that drone. You can pull that drone comb out, throw it in the freezer. It kills all the mites, kills all the bees too. But then you can put it back in, and then they'll clean out all of those dead bees, and then start over. But I like the drone comb personally because I've noticed since I started, I kind of just, it's one of those things you can experiment.
The micro drone manipulate the number of drones you will. But if you've got a failing queen, you've got a lame worker, that's an issue altogether different.
Yeah. I think you're trying to cut me off. If you got any more questions, I'll hang out here in the area. Be happy to talk to you and answer questions or whatever. If you don't run into me, like I said, hit me up on Facebook Messenger or something like that.
Thank you,
Be happy to
Dustin.
talk.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, bud.
There's a so yeah, just don't have Rolla and We're doing
Is getting started with farmers markets, or we can hang out and not hang out, and go to 11:15 and pay for crazy. Or, oh wait, no, 11 is cheese making. So, what do you want to do? You want to?
Tell me.
We want to learn about farmers markets?
Might as well.
Okay.
I don't think there's hours
Yeah.
hanging out.
I don't
especially
either.
Lunch.
Yeah.
We've already been around out there.
Yeah.
Really, the chickens definitely out. Like, yeah, we want to have that farm. No, they just, okay, so the meat chickens are being.
Okay, I guess I have to turn on my microphone. Hold on a second. Oh, because it's all stored on the cloud apparently. Oh, I can shut off the recording too.